In normal times, the big story of the day would be the Home Secretary presenting to the House of Commons the immigration bill. And this is ending free movement of people from the European Union, adopting a global system for immigration into our country based on points. And of course, this is something that I personally have advocated for a very, very long time. Now, of course, there's a lot of detail to sort out. There's where do you set the boundaries? But the very fact this is being debated is a huge political moment for this country, and yet it's going to play pretty much second fiddle, of course, to coronavirus. Absolute chaos over the government's quarantining rules. And I'm going to be asking you tonight, should any country face an exemption from quarantine once they arrive in the UK, even if they have low infection rates? Because Boris told us just over a week ago that there was going to be a big change and that people that did fly into the country would be quarantined. Things today looking somewhat different on that score. And we've just finished with Dominic Raab in the chair, the 5 p.m. daily press briefing on Downing Street. Ben Kentish followed all of it. Ben, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So avoiding the second peak, it seemed, was the sort of theme of Dominic Raab this evening.
It was, and there's a pretty stark message, wasn't there, from Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for England, when he said we might have to be ready to live with this virus for years, because there's been a lot of hope, understandably, put in the idea of a vaccine, possibly one even this year. But the government is keen to prepare people for the possibility that that might not come, and they're also keen to emphasise that, but it helps them explain why they are taking a pretty slow, by any measure, approach to easing the lockdown, because they say, look, we're going to have to think long term on this. There could be more peaks, and Professor Van Tam was talking about the dangers of the autumn and the winter and how those sorts of colder, wetter conditions do tend to lead to more transmission of these types of viruses. And it was a pretty sombre message all the way along, Nigel. Of course, the government said they wouldn't do anything to risk a second peak. But there is a bit of a row about that, particularly on schools, because while the scientists and the ministers say, look, this isn't risky, some parents and teachers saying, well, we're simply not convinced it's safe. When it was put to number 10 today, well, if you're convinced it's safe, why don't you publish the scientific advice recommending schools reopened and suggesting that it is safe? The answer was that, well, this will all be published in due course, but they are not willing to publish it just yet, it seems. And so in relation to schools and second peaks, the row goes on.
Yeah, and you say sort of, they moving slowly as opposed to moving in haste. And remarkable that, we had so many texters and tweeters and callers indeed, I'm going back 2 months now, who said they'd lost their sense of taste and smell. And it did seem to be a very strong correlation between that and those who tested positive for coronavirus. And yet, again and again and again, we were told, by Public Health England and others, no, the signs of COVID-19 are a dry cough, a raised temperature, and that loss of taste and smell was not one of those criteria. I hear they've changed their minds today.
They have. A loss of taste and smell is now one of the 3 symptoms if the people are being asked to isolate, if they have, along with a cough and fever. It came up, Nigel, as you will have heard at that press conference. Why? When France recommended this in March, the World Health Organization has saying for weeks that this is a symptom, why did the UK not? And the answer was interesting, if slightly complex, with Jonathan Van Tam accepting that the government had agreed for all that time that loss of taste and smell was a symptom, but had declined to recommend people isolate if they have it, because they wanted to be sure that it came at the start of the illness in people, and then there was a benefit to doing so. Slightly confusing answer, because people will say, well, if you knew it was a symptom, and quite a common symptom, some studies suggest, why didn't you at least give people some guidance rather than staying silent on it? But he insisted they'd taken a painstaking scientific approach, and again, on that one too, questions will continue to be asked, I suspect. Yeah, well, that was the word on the street 2 months ago, but finally they have caught up. And talking of being slow and delaying things, Health Secretary Matt Hancock, and here's this amazing system that he's going to put into place of testing, tracing, isolating.
When are these thousands of volunteers going to be activated?
Nigel, I wish I could give you an answer on that. There was good news today in some regard, because we know that 21,000 of them have been recruited. What we don't know is what stage that's at. Are they in place? Have they been trained? And when in the Commons Matt Hancock was asked, OK, great, when will this system be up and running? He didn't really answer it. What we do know is that there has been a big delay in the rollout of the NHS app, which ministers were very keen about a month ago to talk up as a key part of this. They're now saying it's not a key part at all. It's only a supplementary part, and therefore it doesn't really matter that it's going to be, by the looks of it, weeks behind the schedule of mid-May that they originally set for rolling it out.
That's right, mid-May.
But the contact tracing, they said, would be up and running in mid-May. We know that they have these 21,000 in place, and we wait to see when the system will be properly up and running.